bright the background is for Allison. I gotta be better with my green screening.
Amazing. Well, why don't we just get started and we'll let people join kind of as we go. So just to kick things off, I think thanks so much for joining us today to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is pleasure and intimacy. I know this is something I spend a lot of time talking with my friends about, both like discovering what feels good for my body and even like how I discover that. So I'm very excited to have a couple of experts on the call with us today to go through this. Someone on our Instagram referred to Dr. Rose as a sex doula, and that just really resonated with me. So I am excited to learn more with you today. And just a quick reminder for everyone that is joined, we are recording this session and we will share it out with all the attendees afterwards. So you'll get all of the goods later if you miss anything or have to hop off. I know we got a couple questions in advance, so we'll definitely pepper those into the discussion, but you can also add any to the Q&A or into the chat box and we'll answer those as we go. And just to kick things off, I am Allison Grant. I lead the marketing team here at Origin. So a little bit about us, we are physical therapy for women and moms with a focus really, let me just get these slides going, there we go. With a focus on helping women feel good in their body really through every stage of life. So whether that be sexual health related, pregnancy, postpartum, and into menopause, we are here to help women with, feeling good in their full body. It's also super important to us that this care is accessible. So we are in network with most commercial insurance plans. We have clinics across California, and then we also do virtual care across California, Texas, and New York, which is where Lee is visiting with us from. So I'll give you a brief intro on today's speakers, and then I will hand it over to them to get into all of the nitty gritty. So first we have Dr. Rose Schlaff. So Dr. Rose supports women all over the world in her virtual coaching practice, where she helps women overcome barriers to intimacy and reclaim their lives that are filled with fun, fearless pleasure, which sounds awesome. I need to just get on board with that. And then in addition to her virtual coaching, she's also a guest lecturer at the University of Michigan's Human Sexuality Certificate Program, San Diego State University's Marriage and Family Therapy, Sexuality and Intimacy course, which is a doozy. And then she's lectured all over the world. And you can also find her on Instagram at Be Well with Rose. And then we also have Dr. Lee Welch, who is one of Origin's physical therapists based out of Brooklyn. And she works with our patients virtually from a full body perspective. One of her goals is to help women feel confident, capable, and in control of their physical health, which sounds incredible. And so I think that's a perfect segue into some of the things that we're going to have them talk about today. So with that, Rose, I will turn it over to you to just talk through the roadmap of intimacy you're going to share with us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you everyone for being here. Before we get started, I always like to kind of ground down. I know that we've all been rushing around. Usually, like if we have kids at home, if we have, family, friends, work, there's a lot going on that happens on a Thursday before, 5 p.m. for my time, if you're on the East Coast, 8 p.m. So if you can I just invite you to join me in kind of rubbing your hands together. We're going to do a little grounding technique. So just kind of start to notice the heat from your hands. I'm going to close my eyes. You're welcome to join. And I'm going to put a hand on my belly and a hand on my heart. Taking a deep breath in and out. We're going to do that 2 or 3 more times. In and out. In this moment, there is nowhere else you need to be. You can sit back, relax, receive, learn, explore. And before we come back, I just want you all to just think about one intention, one thing you would like to get out of today. And after another deep breath, we're going to start wiggling the fingers, wiggling the toes, coming back. And if anyone feels called to share their intention for today, I would love to know, if you want to pop it in the chat, what you are hoping to get out of today. We are all here together. I talk to people all day long about the things that we don't really talk about normally: sex, intimacy, things that we see on TV that seem like, hey, everybody else has no problem with this. Like, what's going on with me? And I just want you all to know that this is a safe space and we're all kind of navigating these waters together. So let's see. Awesome. Be gentle with my body. I love that. So powerful to be gentle. And anyone else who's listening, if you do want to just hit the, Allison, if you know how to change, I think it's hitting the 3 dots on the top of your screen to change and put your pronouns, just so I don't take a guess if you want to add your pronouns to your name. Do you know how to guide people how to do that?
I think because it's a webinar, they don't have like the full screen. So I don't show, I don't know how they do that if they're just attendees. So it might not be possible on this one.
Okay. Got it. All right. Yeah, I never use webinar. I only ever use like typical baseline Zooms.
Totally.
All right. Well, so today I'm really, really excited. We're going to dive into a number of different things, but we're going to get really clear on where we want to go. We're going to talk about some of the common barriers to intimacy. We're going to talk about some fun tips and tricks that I will oftentimes use with my private clients. And then really go into some pleasure hunting, like really identifying what feels good. So let's start with an activity that I really love. I always talk to people about like what isn't working, either in your bedroom, in your life, what's not going well. I really wish I just don't want sex, or I'm having pain, or my partner won't stop bothering me, trying to get me to be intimate. All of these things are kind of like very clearly things that we're trying to move away from. But sometimes it's hard to have as much clarity about where we're trying to go. I always talk about this like having a road map, basically, of actually pop back, Allison, to the previous. We're going to be there for a minute. So yeah, like I always talk about this, like trying to set your GPS for a road trip that you're like, I just really don't want to go to Arizona. It's like, okay, well, what do we pack? What direction do we go in? Like, what activities are we going to do? Should I pack a swimsuit? Do I need snacks? Are we going to drive 5 minutes? Are we going to drive 5 days? I don't know. And if we can get really clear on where we're going, what we're doing, it makes it a lot easier to start to build that roadmap out and create little baby steps to get you there. So we're going to do a little vision exercise. You can do this with your eyes closed or open, whatever you'd like. I'm going to close my eyes just because that's how I roll. So I'm going to have you just start to deep breathe a couple times. Really settle into your body, into this moment. And I want you to just see yourself kind of start to float up above this moment, past the ceiling, past the roof, up into the clouds. Feel that cool wind on your face. Go ahead and zoom in the clouds 3 months in the future, 90 days in the future. And come on down, start floating down, and find your 3 months future self. Ask your 3 months future self if it's okay if you join the party and come inside. And if they say yes, See if you can slip inside their body, that future version of you. I want you to just settle in. How does this version of you feel? How does this version of you feel in your body? How does this future version of you feel in your relationship? How does this future version of you feel in the bedroom? Really notice, be in that body of your future self. Notice how that feels. And whenever you're ready, I'm going to float back up into the sky, into the cool breeze. Back to the present moment. And coming on down back to where we are today. So I would love to hear one word from people who are open to sharing about what it felt like in your future self's body. Did it feel open? Did it feel scary? Did it feel exciting? Did it feel calm? Did it feel relaxed? What did your future self feel like? Confident, awesome. I love that. What did that confidence feel like in your body? Did it live anywhere in your body? Was it in your chest? Was it in your posture? Was it in your stomach? Was it in your shoulders? Where did that confidence live? Light, confident, beautiful. Yeah, I feel like confidence for me just feels kind of this like expansion in my chest, kind of like a lightness in my shoulders, an openness in my body. It's really awesome to get clear on what the body sensations are with some of these emotions, because then we can kind of notice when they start to come up in our present life, right? So this is how we start to build a roadmap back to ourselves, right? We get clear on how it feels. Confidence was in my posture, my chest, my shoulders, my upper back. That's awesome. Really good feedback. Thanks for sharing that. So we notice how that feels, and then we can start to build from there, right? What is making us feel confident now in our current life? And where are the areas where we're kind of out of alignment with that feeling? And how do we get clear on creating those baby steps, step by step by step? Awesome. So Allison, I'll have you flip. So especially in the bedroom, and any time we're talking about our future selves, like what is going on, what's keeping us stuck, there's some common roadblocks. And one of the things that I talk to with my clients all the time is, if I am hearing multiple times a day, people telling me the same thing, like they feel like they're not doing enough. They feel like they're just doing it wrong. Like, why is everybody else having this awesome experience in the bedroom, like feeling confident, able to ask for what they want, able to know what they want, and why can't I, right? And I think that if you're feeling that, you're not alone. And I just want you to know that this is a systemic issue. This is not an issue with you as an individual. There are many things in our society that are contributing to this, right? Things that we see in the media. For example, like how many times have we seen a movie with like two white, skinny, straight couple, man and a woman. They have missionary sex for 3 minutes, and then they both have perfect orgasms, and everybody's happy, right? And like it
I
just
was watching, what was that show that everyone was obsessed with a couple months ago with
Bridgerton.
yeah. Bridgerton, I was like, this is so unrealistic. People are orgasming the first time they have sex after like 30 seconds.
Right. Right. And it makes us feel like we're failing, right? If we're not experiencing that, we're like, God, if Bridgerton can do it in the like whatever year that was, like in 30 seconds, why can't I? Right. And so it's really, really important to just notice like all these things in our society that are really setting us up to say, like, hey, we're on a different wavelength than we're being shown is possible. Like, what is possible and what is realistic for us living a real human experience is different than what media has portrayed for years and years and years. And so I think this is what comes into so many of the times, like into our head of when we're actually in sex, kind of like second guessing ourselves and being like, oh God, like, what do I look like? Right? Is my body reflecting media's beauty standards, right? Do I have a hair out of place? Do I have an ingrown hair? Do I have a pimple on my butt? Do I have a double chin? You know, that's usually airbrushed out of the media. Am I, you know, what do I smell like? Have I been told by advertisers that my vagina should not smell like anything other than flowers, which is not true. You know, our bodies have different odors and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Kind of these things that are like swirling and swirling and swirling around in our head. And I think it's really important to name these things and identify them as, you know, this is a really important piece of the puzzle. Can anybody identify with any like TV shows or movies that they saw as a kid that was like, wow, that really did not set me up for success realism wise, as far as it goes with sex? Like Bridgerton was a great example. If anybody has any other examples, I'd love to see them popped in the chat.
All of Sex in the City.
100%.
I'm excited for the remake, but I'm just cautiously optimistic.
Right, right. Absolutely. Yeah. And so I feel like Sex in the City has 4 different women's experiences of sex, but all like I don't know if anyone identifies with those. Some you may identify with some parts of them, but it's interesting because that was such a groundbreaking show when it came out too, right? So I think another piece of this puzzle of like what's getting in the way of us getting to that future vision of ourselves, that like confident, light version in and out of the bedroom, is really just having like basic understanding of some of the ins and outs of the physiology and anatomy involved in sex, right? So let's talk about, I saw a couple of questions come through from Allison earlier that I think this will start to address, but let's talk about like the actual anatomy. And my pelvis totally fell apart right before this talk, so bear with me. And I just got an answer, not from when I was a kid, but any scenes where they wake up gorgeous after sex and there's no talk of morning breath or peeing after sex. Yes, thank you for pointing that out, Devin. That is so accurate, right? Like you might be sweaty during sex, or like there might be fluids happening, and it's like nobody's talking about this. Everybody is just goes to sleep perfectly, wakes up perfectly, and you know, with their makeup on, not smudged, right? Not washed off. Exactly. Awesome. So let's talk about some of the physiology and anatomy here. So my pelvis fell apart, as I was saying, but bear with me with my broken pelvis. Here is your pelvis, right? And so we have a number of different things that are impacting sexual function here. We've got the pelvic floor muscles down here. All right. Can everybody see me? Okay. So multiple different layers of muscles here. This is looking from the ground up, like if you were an ant looking up at the sky, right? So we've got surface layer muscles here supporting these external structures. And you can see even in my model, like this tiny little dot is supposed to be the clitoris. But when we really like look at the clitoris is actually 10 centimeters long. It's huge internal structure. And so this little thing is just the tip of the iceberg. And there's actually big internal legs that go on either side of the labia here. So underneath this, we've got deeper pelvic floor muscles, and you can see they form this bowl. So this is the anus, this is the vagina, and this is the tailbone. So all of these muscles are working together during sexual activity. And anytime you're having pain or discomfort, there's a number of things that might be going on. But we have to acknowledge that the pelvic floor is a muscle, just like any other muscle. It needs to be able to contract, relax, and lengthen, right? So for contraction, we're talking about generating an orgasm with rhythmic contractions. Contractions also help stabilize our spine, help us hold our poop and pee in. And then relaxation, we need to be able to relax fully to allow for pain-free sex, and then allow us to get our poop and pee out, right? So pelvic floor muscles are really important both in pleasure, and if they're not able to relax fully, they can contribute to pain. So talking about the clitoral anatomy, like the clitoris being huge under the internal labia, and then also understanding the muscle structure there is really important for, getting to that place of intimacy and feeling confident in intimacy, because it's like, instead of just being a jumble of skin and hair and like, I don't really know what's going on down there, it's really helpful to know, okay, these are the places where my body might experience more pleasure, not just at the clitoris, at the tip of the clitoris that is at the opening, but even under the labia, if we can kind of explore some of that. And then also right inside the opening of the vagina, there's a portion of the clitoris that basically comes down that you can press onto at the top. So if sometimes people will call this the G spot, and there's different ways to refer to this area. So I'm going to look back at this question that Allison sent me before, just to make sure that I address this. But if you are having pain at the opening of the vagina, so here, you can see there's little muscles here that might be contributing, but oftentimes if you're just having pain right at the beginning of penetration, there's sometimes hormonal changes that can happen to this part of the vulva tissue. So if you're in a low hormone state, like if you're breastfeeding or postpartum, or even if you are on oral birth control pills, this is something to consider here. So that might be a hormonal reason. And then if the pain is deeper inside, then we're kind of talking about more like pelvic floor muscles. So another piece of this, when we're talking about physiology and anatomy, is the majority of women, especially women in long-term relationships, experience desire in a way that isn't really shown very widely on media. So I think a lot of the time we're expected to experience desire like spontaneous desire, which means that we basically like wake up, we look at our partner and we're like, let's have sex. I'm into it. I'm feeling it. Right. And that's really not the way that many women, especially women in long-term relationships, experience desire. Many women experience more responsive desire, which is kind of like if you are up for it, but you're like, I'm not really super in the mood, but I know that I'll feel connected to you afterwards. So I'm game to try. And then once you're in it, you get into it because you're kind of like in a sexy situation. So that's responsive desire. Your body is responding to sexual stimulus. So we can really like look at responsive desire and say, hey, we can use an understanding of the physiology here to work with this and actually like biohack the system. So if you're not ever waking up and being like, I would love to have sex right now, or if curling up with a good book always sounds better to you than having sex, like you're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. And also there's concrete strategies that we can use to work on this, right? So the things that help really support responsive desire and set you up for success are 1, low stress in general, 2, a low pressure environment, and 3, something a little bit sexy. So can anyone, give me an example of something that would make a situation feel pressured, like um, maybe internalized or externalized? And this, I can, yep, curling up with a good book is always better than sex. Yep, you're not
I
the
mean, I
only
often
one.
feel the pressure to, am I going to orgasm? What if I don't orgasm? Like, what does that say? That's definitely something
Yes.
that happens to me.
Yeah, that is such a common one, Allison. Thank you for naming that. Trying to get pregnant is a huge one too. A fertility journey can really create a lot of pressure because it's just like certain windows where, like, okay, we're fertile, like, let's do this, and like you're thinking about this outcome. Like, what if we don't make this outcome happen? And it can definitely impact your libido. So oftentimes, like, I have worked with women in the past. One woman, Megan, that's coming to mind specifically, who she came to me because she had no trouble having an orgasm when she was alone. But anytime she was with a partner, she could not have an orgasm. And she said, just like you, Allison, she just felt this like tremendous pressure and stress of like, oh, I'm taking too long, my partner's getting bored, I look weird, my body's doing weird things, I'm sweating, I'm grunting, gosh, did that noise just come out of me? What if I never come? I'm probably never going to come. What's the point of even trying, right? And all of these thoughts kind of go through our heads, and that can really take us out of the moment. It takes us out of our body and into our head. And so just normalizing this and saying, like, okay, in what ways am I putting pressure on myself, or am I creating, or am I contributing to the pressure, or in what ways can we take the pressure off, right? Pressure of P and V being expectation during intimate times, even when it's not. Thank you so much for normalizing this and naming it. This is humongous. It's another one of society's shoulds, right? So when we talk about sex, a lot of the time people think that sex is literally just penis and vagina, right? Sex gets to be whatever the hell you want it to be. For me, I identify as sex as any type of, physical intimacy that feels good and feels connected, either with myself or with a partner, right? And that can include a whole list of things, internal, external, might not even be below the belt, right? And for many reasons, you know, P and V penetration is a total turnoff for any physical intimacy. So let's talk about my client, Patricia. She came to me first because she was having pain with intimacy. But when we really started getting into the nitty gritty of like, hey, what's going on in your relationship? She started telling me, hey, anytime my husband takes my hand or rubs my back or gives me a kiss, I actually like pull away, and I feel kind of like physically sick because I don't want it to lead to penetration because it hurts. And anytime we're out of the house, I actually really love giving my husband hugs and holding his hand and giving him kisses. But I don't really know how to create a sense of safety here, in the house. Has anybody, experienced anything similar to that? You can just say me if you want in the chat. And I think that in the recording, the chat is not going to be a part of it. So I won't say any names. It'll just be us here. But I just want to let you know that you're not the only one experiencing it. I talk to women all day long who have this same complaint, right? And this outcome of penis and vagina penetration or orgasm, or even just like, God, if I don't have sex, then I'm going to lose my partnership, or my partnership's going to suffer, or we're going to grow further and further and further apart until we divorce or, break up. All of these things can be pressure from internal and external combination. And if we name them, if we get clear on them, we can start to create safety around them. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Okay. Can we, yeah, awesome. So this gets to be fun. Like, I know we're talking about barriers and understanding the barriers, but I think it's really important to name these things, to name all of the ways that society contributes to this, all the ways that you didn't come out of the womb being like, there's something wrong with my body and I need to have penis and vagina sex to be successful. And if I don't have an orgasm immediately, then I'm taking too long, right? Like these are things that we picked up on the way living in society. And I just want you to know that you're not doing anything wrong if you're feeling this, and you're not alone. So let's talk about one of my favorite exercises to do here. So with my client, Patricia, when she was saying, okay, every time my husband holds my hand in the house, I feel physically sick. I know he's trying to have sex with me. I don't want to have sex. And he feels like I'm not attracted to him anymore. That's not the case. I love him. I'm attracted to him. I just have pain during penetration and I don't want to do that. But in our society, it's hard to kind of set that boundary. And so I always talk about boundaries the way I talk about food. So just hearing the word boundary, can any of you kind of like put in the chat what comes to mind with the word boundary, if there's like one word association that comes to mind? Because it's always interesting what people think about boundaries. But as people are coming through in the chat, communication, stop sign, yeah, awesome. Both of those can be true. And sometimes a boundary is a stop sign and sometimes it's a yellow light. And that's actually what I call this exercise. So if anybody has a pen and a paper nearby, you can kind of follow along with this. But I call this red light, green light, yellow light. And so for Patricia, this was really, really powerful in creating safety around things that she didn't want to do, creating a stop sign around those things, and then creating safety to explore the things that she actually did like in a vacuum, like out in the house when it was a little bit more safe. She liked holding hands, she liked hugging, she liked kissing. So if you have a pen and paper nearby, I'm just going to have you write green, yellow, red. And green light items are items that are basically like, I always love this. I'm always down. It sounds great all the time. Like for me, a green light is like, if you ever want to rub my feet or rub my shoulders, like that's going to be a green from me. I'm literally never going to say no. There's no chance that I'm not going to want that. Right? Like that always sounds great to me. And then if you think about a yellow might be, sometimes this feels good and sometimes it doesn't. So for Patricia, holding hands was actually a yellow. And not just identifying when things are yellow, but also identifying, okay, what are the scenarios in which these are yellow? So for her, she said yellow. And she said being in the house versus being out of the house made it more green or more red. Right? So yellow things are things that sometimes feel good and sometimes don't feel good. And then red items are things that you're never down with, right? So for Patricia, because she was having pain with penetration, her red item was penetration, penis and vagina. So your red item could be touching your feet, right? Some people hate having their feet touched. Could be anything, but it's really important to get clear on these reds because a lot of the time we feel like we can't ask for anything other than what society says we should be doing in bed, right? Which is penetration. And so if this is a red for you, I will oftentimes have my clients create either a short-term hard stop boundary or a long-term hard stop boundary with this. Right. So for Patricia, we said, let's have a conversation with your partner. I'm going to have you both do a green light, yellow light, and red light list. You're going to compare. You're going to talk about what surprised you. You're going to talk about what didn't surprise you. And whatever red light items are coming up, we're going to set a boundary around for the next 21 days. Knowing like, hey, we're not doing any of these red list items. Don't even ask, don't even anticipate it. And a couple things came up. from that. So one, her husband actually got a lot of clarity. He was like, oh, it's not that you're not attracted to me. It's not that you don't love me anymore. It's that you're having pain. That makes sense. And Patricia got safety because they had an agreement. Hey, we're not doing this activity. You're not going to assume we are. You're not going to ask me. There's no pressure to. And she actually found that she was able to really enjoy hand holding, kissing, hugging, all these other activities that were previously making her feel sick beforehand. So I just think this is such a beautiful example of how we can create safety. And I really believe that safety is the key to pleasure, right? And we do that through clear communication and boundaries.
So when you're like doing this with a client, do you suggest that they do this with their they and their partner both create them and then like talk about them together? Or how do you sort of share that with someone else?
Yeah, absolutely. So it can be kind of like a date night thing. It can be kind of fun. Sometimes I'll have people just do their own list and switch. Sometimes I have people try to guess their partners, depending on the energy of the relationship and what is, should be playful. It should be fun. I think talking about sex can feel so heavy, right? It can feel so, so heavy. And I try to create some levity around it and some just like play. For example, like I will oftentimes compare talking about sex to talking about pizza. Like if you are a mushroom and anchovy lover and your partner is a pepperoni mushroom bell pepper lover, there's a commonality of green mushrooms, and maybe your partner is like a red on anchovies and you're a yellow on peppers. So you get a mushroom bell pepper pizza, and then half of it has, pepperoni and the other half has anchovies. So in food, we would never shame anyone for not liking anchovies, or I mean, at least I wouldn't, I don't know. But, it's just more normalized, and there's no stress or pressure talking about, oh yeah, I don't want to eat anchovies. So
I feel like just pineapple gets shamed.
Right.
To jump in real quick, there's a great YouTube video on that analogy of sort of rethinking sex and discussing sex as like having pizza versus the very typical like baseball terminology where, right, the goal is home base and like penis and vagina sex. And so no, it's not, it's a TED talk, I think is what it is, but you can find it on YouTube, I'm sure. So I think that really like goes into some nice depth about everything Rose is talking about, and has some nice visuals, and it's pretty funny too.
Yeah. Right. It's like kind of nice to laugh about this. Like we get to laugh about sex. It feels so heavy sometimes. Right. And another metaphor for boundaries that I will oftentimes use is like, if you have a heinous walnut allergy, like a deadly walnut allergy, and then you go to a dinner party without telling anyone, and you're just like, wow, I really hope there's no walnuts in this food. Like you're going to be terrified that entire dinner party. You're not going to enjoy it. You're going to be totally in your head. And if you were to just say like, hey, I have a walnut allergy, is there any walnuts in this food? You would have clarity like, hey, these are the non-walnut foods. And the other person would be able to figure out a situation for you, a walnut-free situation. But without giving that information, the other person could just easily cross your boundaries. And so it's a two-way street. Why we have to identify what we need, ask for it, and then the other person gets to decide, okay, whether I'm going to meet that request or not. And then we have to decide if my requests are not met, then what, right? Okay, let's flip this slide, Allison. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about the other part of this, which is really leaning into the pleasure side. So, once we have that safety established, once we kind of get rid of those red light items, or at least create a short-term solution to protect ourselves from them, we get to start exploring what feels good and starting to kind of create sensory experiences of goodness, right? And the reason why I talk about safety, and it's so important, is because we have two different nervous systems in our body. We have our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system. And our sympathetic nervous system is our fight, flight, fear nervous system. That's like if we're running from a tiger and if we're in stress. And then our parasympathetic is our rest and digest nervous system. This is when we're chilling, relaxing, able to digest our food. This is also when we're most available for sex. Because if we're running from a tiger, our bodies are not going to be like, you know what would be a great thing to do right now? Stop and have some sex or make a baby, right? It's not an ideal time. So this is another way that we can kind of create openings for responsive desire, is by decreasing stress overall, by shifting you, creating safety, right? And then shifting you into a space where you're feeling good, comfortable, and joyful in all areas of life. So when we talk about pleasure hunting, it's really important to think about all the different senses. And this is true for in the bedroom and out, right? So anything that gives you joy, makes you feel good with sense, hearing, music, looking at different things, maybe tasting, like maybe eating a really good meal that just makes you happy. Different sensations, right? Different pressures, hot, cold, vibration, all of these things are to be explored, because it's something that we don't really get information about in sex ed in school, right? It's like how not to get pregnant, the end. Sometimes we didn't even get sex ed. Sometimes we get don't have sex. That's how you don't get pregnant, right? There's no explanation of how to enjoy yourself during sex, how to feel good during sex. And using different sensations, understanding, right, where the anatomy lies, and exploring different parts of your body is really how you figure this out. So a really fabulous resource for this, I don't know, has anybody heard of Oh My God, Yes? So it's a awesome resource, basically, of women demonstrating techniques of like, hey, this is how I experience pleasure. And it is like educational, but it's also demonstrating. So it can be a little bit erotic as well. And so it cues into a couple different parts of responsive desire, right? So the first part is, hey, we're putting you in a little bit of a sexy situation, right? You're seeing someone explore their body. And then two, you're getting exact like instruction manual of, hey, this is what works for my body. I don't know what's going to work for yours, but at least you can try it.
I gave OMG yes to literally all the women in my family as a Christmas this year.
That's amazing.
It's paying the dividends. I feel like it's just incredible.
That's so awesome, Allison. I'll put a link down here, but I am doing a group program. It's starting next week, and if anybody in here is a part of it, I don't think there's any of the people, but I am surprising everyone with an OMG Yes membership. So I'm very, very excited about that. It's such a beautiful gift. It's called Oh My God, Yes.
Yeah, if you just Google OMG Yes, you can find it.
I'll get a link at the end, and
I can put it in the recap too.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
I also think OMGS is really great because it does show you there's so many different ways. And I think it just really can help you realize that, continue to sort of explore yourself, and that everyone could be really different, right? And so there's not one right way to experience pleasure.
Absolutely. So I wanna leave some space for questions and check in with everybody. How's everyone doing? Anything coming up for you for any of this? there really is no such thing as TMI. Lee and I talk about poop, pee, and sex all day. So
Well, I know we had some questions in advance too, Rose, if you want to, if it's helpful to,
Yeah,
we can answer some of those also.
yeah,
I can pull some of those up, and I think some of them you definitely touched on already. Let me just grab those. So Rose, you already sort of went over like pain at the opening of the vagina, just as penetration is beginning. And we had a related question, like if it's just the beginning, even when you feel relaxed in certain positions.
yeah.
So Rose, do you want to speak about a little bit more to that?
Yeah. So no, but I will, Liz. Okay, so when we're talking about positions, so let's go back to my pelvis here, my little falling apart pelvis. So we've got your pelvic floor muscles are right next to your hip muscles here. So different positions that you're in can impact what your pelvic floor is doing. And so it can impact whether your pelvic floor is able to relax and lengthen. So if you are just someone who tends to kind of like hold tension in your pelvic floor, just like if you worked out yesterday and kind of like touched your muscle, it'd be like, ooh, this is a little bit sore. That can kind of create that soreness and a little bit of tension that just feels like, okay, this doesn't feel as comfortable. And then again, you know, if we're talking right at the opening, especially if you're on oral birth control pills, breastfeeding, postpartum, around menopause, these are all lower estrogen states that can be related to vaginal dryness and discomfort at the opening of the vagina.
Cool. So this other one, another question was asking, addressing intimacy postpartum, managing pain and rebuilding intimacy. So there's definitely a lot that is at play there. Certainly like the lower estrogen state that Rose was just mentioning, and as well as like just so common to feel like really touched out, right? With like all the breastfeeding, let's say, or any feeding or carrying a baby all the time and just not really wanting that touch. So just hearing what Rose was talking about tonight, I love like the green, yellow, red light sort of like tool that you could potentially use with a partner as you're maybe thinking about returning back to penetrative sex, if that's like your ultimate goal, but knowing that there's a lot of those little steps along the way to get there. And Rose, if you have other strategies that you want to share, that'd be great.
Yeah, I definitely think we need to name that touched out. I think that's so common postpartum. And, you know, I don't know if you have all heard of love languages, but this is often something I talk about postpartum because, you know, maybe say your partner's love language is physical touch. So there's 5 different love languages, right? Like physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, and acts of service. So super, super common that I'll see postpartum acts of service move to the top of the list, right? It's like, okay, I used to love it when you touched me, but right now everybody's touching me. My baby's touching me constantly. And like the most love you could possibly show me is like emptying out the dishwasher or, you know, taking bedtime so I can get some extra sleep. So I think talking about love languages is really important. I think also just naming that exhaustion that can come in that postpartum time with the sleep deprivation and how that contributes to overall stress level, and really making sure that we're taking the pressure off the outcome of sexual intimacy, physical intimacy. Because when we're talking about this, we have to know that, I mean, everyone identifies it differently, but for me, I view sex as any time that we're physically connecting. And maybe it looks different postpartum. Maybe it's 5 minutes. Maybe it's kissing. Maybe it's touching. Maybe it's, you know, just doing something small before bedtime, doing something small in the morning, you know, shifting and getting creative with how are we going to stay connected? How are we going to express love, and how are we going to like feel pleasure in our bodies, because it's still important, but we also need to acknowledge the sleep, the hormones, the feeling touched out, all these other things, and know that there's nothing wrong with you if you're feeling that way.
Rose, do you want to hit on the question about like vaginal trainers and how those could be helpful with pleasure? And Liz, do you want to just clarify if you're talking about more of like a biofeedback, like Kegel trainer, or like a dildo or vibrator or something like that? Or we can talk about them all.
We can talk about them all. So dilator type. Okay, so let's talk about like different toys. I actually have a podcast episode that I did that's probably like the best named podcast I've ever been a part of, which is called Vag Gadge. It's all about vaginal gadgets. So I'm happy to share that with Allison at the end too, if y'all want to listen to that. But there's many tools and things that we can use to help prepare our bodies for pleasure. So dilators. Basically, dilators are like a silicone, it's like a medical grade dildo is what I would say, honestly. Like they're different sizes and shapes, usually smaller, gradually expanding. This would be good for someone who maybe has had pain with penetration in the past, or felt like they are basically like their partner is hitting a wall when they try to insert a toy or a penis or a finger. Like their muscles are just kind of closing down. So that can be a good way to kind of train opening, relaxation, both working alone and with a partner. We can also talk about the pelvic floor muscles as it relates to pleasure and orgasm. So learning how to do a pelvic floor muscle contraction properly, really talking about like a Kegel. So you can either go to a pelvic PT and have them assess your pelvic floor, or you can kind of get one of these Kegel training devices, like they have apps or different things that you can use to get feedback internally to see like, am I doing a pelvic floor muscle contraction? And then am I able to generate pressure? Am I able to relax fully, right? Like if you can't relax fully, that can impact your ability to orgasm too, because if my muscles are already fully contracted and then they need to contract to generate an orgasm, they can't really go anywhere, right? So Kegel trainers can be helpful there. And then also vibration is an awesome thing that can address pain and desensitizing your nervous system. So oftentimes when we've had pain in the past, using a vibration feature with either a dilator or a dildo or whatever you're using to kind of like explore your body again can be helpful. It kind of like shakes up the nervous system. The nervous system's like, what the heck is this? Like, that's not necessarily painful. Like, I don't really know how to react to this. Should I protect myself? Should I don't know. So that's something that can be used as well. And then a vibrator is really awesome for exploring which areas of your body experience pleasure. You know, we can look at the inner thighs, we can look at, you know, lower abdomen, or again, remembering that the internal clitoris is right on either side of the labia, right? So if we're thinking about like right through here, so not just going straight to the clitoris with a vibrator, but also kind of coming down in here, exploring all of that area and seeing, okay, does any of that feel better than others, right? And it's all about mapping your own body.
Amazing.
Cool. Do we have time for one more, maybe?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, so this is a question, and I'm going to sort of give my thoughts, and then I'm curious to hear if Rose has sort of more info with all of her sort of expert background. So question is, why don't I feel horny or wet in the mornings? Morning sex isn't really happening for me. And so my thoughts are just that that's not necessarily wrong at all. And that might just be sort of your particular thing. And probably, again, that it's sort of one of those things that's portrayed as being probably more normal than it actually is. But Rose, I'm curious if you sort of have more insight into that.
Yeah, I think there's so many different things that can impact libido in different parts of the day, right? Like sometimes we can look at like cortisol levels or blood sugar levels. Like there's a lot of different things that are impacting hormones, even in our like circadian rhythms, our 24-hour cycle. Could be a part of like where you're at in your 28-day cycle if you're a person who menstruates, right? Like certain days you will just have more access to hormones that are more likely to make you horny, right? Um, Sleep deprivation is really powerful too. Like sometimes people are just like, it's really hard to wake up in the morning and it's really hard to like get energized to even think about having sex or being sexual or having physical intimacy. If you're like not really awake or if you're starting your day and rushing around, like all of these things are true. And there's no perfect formula for what time of day I should have sex. Like when is it optimal, right? And it's about finding your groove, finding what works for you, and there's nothing wrong with you if you're experiencing that. And it's beautiful that you have that awareness.
Amazing. Well, thank you both, Rose and Lee, for joining, and for everyone who attended. As I mentioned, we'll be sending this out after the fact. So if you had to drop off or missed the first half or second half, we'll share it with you after. But thank you guys so much for joining.
Yes. And I have a little free guide that's basically kind of like goes a little bit more into the outline of this talk. So if you're looking for an outline type thing from this chat, I'll drop it in the the box here. Give me 1 second.
And Rose, we'll share links to all of your stuff in the recap as well, so anyone will be able to get that.
Awesome.
Great. Well, thank you everyone so much. Have a good rest of your night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for being here.